7:42 a.m., 1979. A college bus full of teenagers heads out for a short field trip. 10:06 a.m., the first call for help. The bus never checks in. Weeks later, a letter, written 13 years before that day, turns up by chance and points back to a road everyone knows. 18 kids, a TA, a professor. Fog on the windows, lunch bags, quick jokes. Then the line goes quiet. Stay with me until the last second. Every minute, every small detail matters. If real, fact-based mysteries keep you watching, please subscribe to the channel and tap the bell so you don't miss the next case. Where are you watching from? Comment your city name below. At 10:06 a.m. on Friday, November 9th, 1979, the radio room at the Hollis County Sheriff's Office logged the first call. It came from the front desk at Redford County Community College. The dispatcher, a woman named Teresa who had been on the job for 8 months, wrote it down the same way she wrote everything. Block letters, time first, underlined twice. The man on the line said the college bus with 18 students from the geology program had not arrived at the Eldon Caves as planned. It had left campus before 8 at 7:42 a.m. and should have checked in by 9. Professor Wicker was supposed to sign the trip roster on arrival. There was no call, no check-in, and nobody had seen the bus at the Caves toll booth. Teresa asked the usual questions. What was the route? Who was the driver? How many seats? She wrote bus 27, 1973 Blue Bird, driver H. Brandt, Eldon Caves, 42 miles, 18 students, 1 TA, 1 professor. The air outside was cold and wet, a gray smear of low cloud and light drizzle, the kind that makes a fog along fence lines. The highway map on the squad room wall still had pins in it from last spring's flood. When Teresa hung up, she told the room, low but clear, looks like we've got a late bus. The last confirmed sighting of the bus was at 8:13 a.m. crossing Garnancy Hargreaves, stationed at Dewey and 3rd, told deputies later that she saw the bus roll by, the numbers stenciled on the roof, kids' faces in the fog glass, 2 hands raised to the glass in a game, and the driver tapping the wheel with 2 fingers as if to count time to a song only he heard. Nancy's watch had fogged up on the inside, but she remembered the church chime from St. Luke's across the square had just finished the hour with a long bell and a quarter chime. She said the bus turned toward County 7, which is where it should have gone. The college posted the roster by the lobby television in case anyone made it back on their own. Names on paper look thin. You can read them fast and feel nothing until you attach a face. The TA, Joseph Young, had signed a breakdown kit from the motor pool at 7:28 a.m. The kit had a flare tube, 2 triangles, and a blue Duralast flashlight, number stamped 117-8. The bus driver, Harold Brandt, age 54, had driven routes in Hollis County since 1962. He had gray hair that never laid down flat, wore a brown jacket with an iron seam line, and smoked Kent cigarettes. He had a paper cup habit. There was always a coffee with his name in black marker in the bus cup holder. He had asked for the field trip assignment the week before. I like a straight shot, he had told the dispatcher who handled campus vehicles. Kids are good when it's a trip. They sit still. Less stops. By 10:26 a.m., Sheriff Carlin had 2 cruisers running the Eldon Caves route eastbound and 2 running it from the other end westbound. At 10:51 a.m., Deputy Howard radioed in from mile marker 14 on County 7. He had found a pair of orange cones, not county issue, set out near the Redwood Cutoff. Hand-lettered detour signs had been nailed to fence posts, arrows pointing right. The nails were bright and clean, and the tagboard still smelled of fresh paint. Redwood Cutoff is a narrow, county-maintained road that drops low and loops back to 7, skirting 2 farm ponds, a field of Angus, and a grove of cottonwood. In 1979, a lot of people took it because you could shave 6 minutes off the trip. In spring, the county closed it when the silt washed over the low dip at the culvert. There was no record of an official detour that day. Howard photographed the signs, rolled the cones to the ditch, and took his unit down the cutoff. The drizzle made a fine mist on the hood, and his wipers squeaked on their return. At 11:14 a.m., A farmer named Russell Caldwell called the dispatcher and reported a loud metallic sound, like a dumpster dropped around 8:25 a.m. It came from the direction of the low fields toward Crier Road. He had been in his barn oiling a chain. He told his wife then that it sounded like someone had dropped a tractor bucket on concrete, or the ringing inside a silo if you smacked the side with a tool. He wrapped the chain, checked his cattle, and saw nothing out of place. He did not call until he heard on the noon radio that a bus was missing. When Deputy Howard got to his place at 12:02 p.m., Russell said, "If I had known, I would have called right then. It felt wrong." Deputies ran Redwood cutoff end to end. Tire impressions bled into the mud. Where it ran low near the trees, the road showed fresh tracks from a heavy vehicle. There was a scrape on the guardrail where the paint had chopped off in a bright line and flakes of yellow had lodged in the burr of the metal. A single red reflector lay in the water where the ditch widened. Howard took photographs, marked his ruler next to the marks, and put the reflector in a brown paper bag and wrote the time and his initials across the fold. At 1:09 p.m., Sheriff Carlin asked for the county road foreman to meet him at a map table. The foreman, a small man named Earl Darnell who always had soil under his nails and a watchband scuffed by years of flattening, brought the closure ledger. He said there had been no detour order that morning, not from him. He did not sign off on any cones or fresh signs. He had not sent a truck out there. He circled Redwood and traced the low dip. This here always takes water. We didn't get a hard freeze yet. Ground is soft, and the culvert swallows it slow since silt packed it in. But no, not closed this morning, he said. He looked pale. Kites went up. Helicopters set down in the field behind Caldwell's barn, then lifted and ran patterns as long as the light held. Divers from the county volunteer squad cut into the cold water of the Redfield Quarry and in the South Fork near the Crier Bridge, wearing black neoprene that steamed when they stood up and goosebumps laddered their pale arms. They dropped lines and swept arcs. The water was coffee black with silt. There was no shape like a bus. The downstream drag pulled a triangle of broken limbs onto the sand. A bag of chips bobbed against a root ball. The evening cooled. The drizzle kept on. The field behind a farm turned into mud trenches from the tires. State troopers lit the detour sign with high beams and took plaster casts of a few tracks where the mud held the shape. They found a handprint on the signboard, the oily map of fingers, and lifted it with powder. The print was smeared. You could see maybe a cut line through the middle of the ring finger mark, as if the person had nicked it in the last day or two. At 2:36 a.m., November 10th, in a clerk's office under the hum of old lights, they printed a single sheet with 3 paragraphs for distribution to the press in the morning. The headline said, "Only college bus missing." It had the plate number, the driver's name, the number of students, and a phone number to call with leads. The photograph of the bus they printed from was 2 years old. It showed Bus 27 in a winter lot, snow rimmed around the tires, a crow perched on the mirror, and the word Redford cut by salt stains. Every radio played the words in a loop. The college canceled the rest of the week's classes. When a case like this breaks the surface and then sinks again, the things that float feel like they mean more than they do. A scrap of paper can look like a sign. A hunch feels like a map. But some pieces do matter. A clerk at Clay's service station faxed a receipt to the sheriff. The driver had stopped at 7:18 a.m., bought 5 gallons of diesel and a pack of Kents. He chatted with a trucker about the drizzle and asked if County 7 was clear around Redwood. The trucker wrote his name on the back of the receipt for reasons that only make sense if you live that way, where you know to route on whatever is at hand. His name was Ronnie. He later told a deputy that the driver seemed alert, not spooked, not drunk. He had a little white around his eyes when he laughed, like a man whose laugh is muscle memory and not mood. At 8:08 a.m., 3 girls from a senior home had waved to the bus as it rolled past the edge of town. They were waiting for the senior home's own van. The bus windows were fogged, and someone inside had drawn a smiley face on the fog. You cannot tell a field with details like that, but they stick. The college dean, Elaine Brooks, stood in a hallway with a paper cup of black coffee and read the roster aloud to a sergeant with a pencil. Dana Reed, 17. Miguel Santos, 18. Lila Kern, 18. Jared O'Neill, 19. Aisha Morrow, 18. Louise Park, 19. Peter Nash, 18. Kenneth Onsikizinji. Felicia Remy, 18. Thomas Sue, 18. And on. She said she saw most of them as they loaded, wearing flannel and denim, carrying notebooks and brown bag lunches and a stack of rock hammers that had been checked out from the Earth Sciences cabinet and signed for by the TA, Joseph Young. There had been laughter about the old tan first aid kit with the metal latch because it rattled like a treasure chest. When she said that, she went quiet. The first twist did not come from a search line or a road crew. It came from a room a mile away, under the buzz of fluorescent light and the warmth of the letters. On Thursday, December 6th, 1979, at 3:42 p.m., during a cleanup at the main post office on Polk Street, 1 month to the day after the bus went missing, the station manager, Nora Damaris, found a cluster of old mail wedged under the lip of a defunct sorting table. The table was being moved to make space for a newer Siemens sorter. The mail had been pushed tight into a gap where a piece of siding had buckled. The bundle was dust-coated, mouse-chewed along a corner, and tied with a brittle rubber band that snapped when she lifted it. Most of the letters were ordinary, advertisements long expired, a church bulletin, a card with a pressed leaf. One was different. Its envelope was stamped June 12, 1966. The postmark was smeared, but you could make out Hollis Company. It was addressed to H. Brandt, Fleet 7 Bus Barn, Cedar Street, Redford. The stamp was a 5-cent Washington. It had never been delivered because sometime in 1966 the bus barn moved 3 blocks south, and the mail sorter had a habit of putting mail with incomplete addresses on a shelf to be run back, and then forgot it. There was no return address. Nora opened it because she needed to see if there was a return address inside. In it she found one onion skin sheet, typed 3 paragraphs. The ribbon had been dry when it hit the paper years ago. The letters looked gray. There was a small hand-drawn map in pencil, folded around the page. She did not understand what it was, but she recognized the name in the first line and went cold. She called the postal inspector, who called Sheriff Carlin. He sent a deputy. The deputy logged it into evidence at 5:12 p.m., typed it out for the file, and then sat in his car in the dusk and smoked without moving for 5 minutes. The letter began with Harold's name. It said, "Harold, if you're still going out there like you said, stop." They moved the marker. Crier Sink is not on the new map. They filled the books and left the hole. I know you saw the sheriff's lights that night, but you didn't see what went down. You buried the last part where nobody looks. I warned you then. I warn you again. Seen water go fast there. You must leave this. And then, as if to prove it, the writer had drawn the bend in the road with a small circle for the sink and a cross to show where an old fence line had been before the county moved it. The letter was signed AG. There were no other pages. No return address. The paper smelled like oil and old heat. The typewriter had typed out a common error, sheriff without the second F, and then corrected it by overtyping, which left the ghost of a letter below. The map showed the little dip past Russell Caldwell's field, and a line down the page marked Crier Road. At 9:23 a.m. the next day, the sheriff's office sent 2 men to AG's last listed address in the county records. The list showed an Arlen Givens, born 1921, road maintenance, employed by Hollis County from 1960 to 1971, retired. He had died on November 7th, 1979, 2 days before the bus disappeared. His son, Dell, met the deputies on his father's porch. He wore a wool watch cap and a jacket too thin for the damp. If the dates bothered him, he did not show it until they showed him the onion skin paper. He looked at the signature and nodded without surprise. "That's his," he said. He loved that dumb typewriter. A Remington. It ate the ribbon and left you a ghost. You could lean into it, but it still had a hush to it. He told them his father had talked about Crier Road enough that it was a sore in the mouth. He said the ground there was a mouth that took what it was fed. He used to say that. I never knew what he meant, Dell said. The deputies asked when he had last seen anyone from the county at the house. He said 2 men from the Public Works garage had come by on November 8th in the afternoon to pick up some old papers and tools he had loaned. One had a road crew jacket. He did not recognize the other. They took a ledger and the Remington. He had signed nothing. He did not know if they had the authority. He said he did not think his father would have called them. They said they would return the next day. They did not. The map line from the letter put the little circle not at the river, but at a shallow depression on what looked like a flat patch of county road 2 miles south of Redwood Cutoff. The county had once called it Cryer's Sink on map margins. In 1971, the county had drawn new road books that shaded over that low area and renamed it simply Low Dip, which is a way of pushing something into a drawer. On December 8th, at 1:11 p.m., a county backhoe dug at the edge of Cryer Road with a deputy watching. The road itself had no formal closure that day. The crew closed it with 2 barricades while they worked. When they pulled the top layer back, just off the crown where the tires would ride, the soil showed a different color in a clean oval. The ovals of different soil mean fill. They found gravel, angular and bright, not yet rounded by traffic, spiked with chunks of concrete and bits of rebar cut short. Whoever had filled it had done it recently. The fill sat on a spongy layer of mud, and then, this was worse. Even to an eye without training, there was a hollow. They put rods down and watched the rods lean in as if something below them pulled on them. The sheriff stood with his arms crossed and watched the road breathe. That night he signed an order to stop heavy vehicles on Cryer Road until a geologist could come look. What a county geologist can tell you is sometimes what you already fear. The man they called was named Shepler. He wore a tan coat and smoked without taking the cigarette from his mouth, talking out one side with the ash trembling. He said the fields around Cryer had karst features. Old limestone runs under them, and the limestone dissolves slow and makes cavities that can open when the surface load changes. Heavy rain, sudden drop in water table, vibrations, any of that can make the roof collapse. The rain in early November had not been much, but the pump at Redfield Quarry had been running hard the 2 days before the bus went missing because their sump had filled from a leak in a pipe. The drawdown can tug water through old channels. He crouched and put his palm on the soil and said, "It's like somebody exhaled a little bit sideways right here." They bored a tube down and hit void at 16 feet. They dropped a camera. The water down, there was a black lens. The camera light picked up shiny edges where larger stones had fallen. A shape like a ring of rubber rose in the frame and then twisted and went out of view as the line shifted. A bus has a ring of rubber. A ring of rubber looks like lots of things. They tried again. Spots swam. The light found nothing. People told new stories. A trucker who called himself Little Crow on the CB said he had heard a voice on Channel 19 around 8:21 a.m. say, "School bus eastbound, just turn off Cryer." Where are they going? There is no tape of that because Little Crow's rig did not have a recorder, but there's a note in Deputy Howard's hand from later that night when the trucker collared him at the Skyview Diner and tried to make him listen. Someone else came forward to say they'd seen a brown Nova in the fog behind the bus near the feed store, one headlight covered with brown tape in an X. A man in a plaid hat had sat high and stiff and smoked without rolling the window. The day after, a clerk at the campus found a stamped letter in the bottom of a locker. It was addressed to K, no last name. The postmark stamp was smeared, but the ink on the stamp looked fresh. It had not been mailed. The writing was tight, sharp, written by someone who pressed hard into the paper. It was from Dana Reed, dated November 9th, 79, 7:55 a.m., written while the bus idled or soon after. It said, "I'm on the bus. Driver says we might detour if the low part is full. He keeps tapping his fingers on the wheel, 1, 2, 3. There's a car behind us with a taped light. I don't like it, but maybe he just needs a new bulb. The windows keep fogging because we're all talking. The TA is joking about rocks. I wish K could have cut like we said. Anyway, I will send this later. Don't tell Dad I'm on a bus to a cave. He will say it's a bad idea, ha." The letter went to the file and to K, who cried at a table under the dean's hand. You weigh things like that, and you feel the scales never settle. Does the Nova matter? Does one headlight mean anything? Was the detour sign the trap? Did the bus driver mean to go down Cryer? Was he forced? Was he tired? Does a driver who has read a letter years before about the word Cryer go, where the sign says, or does he ignore it? Did he even see the sign? Does he listen to chatter behind him and miss the white shape of a deer, swerve, and hit the weak soil with the outside tire and tip slow enough for everyone to think there is time? Or Did everyone scream, and it was over like the lid of a jar, snapping into place. The only clean answer is that the bus left the hard road in some moment that no one alive can testify to, and that the heavy shape punched a soft keyhole in the old limestone roof that had been waiting for a load that big. Evidence item number 31. The red reflector Howard found served only as a reminder of every other object silence. The lab man put it under a light. It had paint transfer on one edge, yellow, matched to fleet paint with the same titanium white ratio as Redford uses, but 1,000 other surfaces could take that same paint without meaning. A few days later, a boy in a John Deere jacket brought a Polaroid to the sheriff. He had been squirrel hunting on Saturday the 10th and had taken a picture of the water by the Crier Bridge to bring home because the way the fog lay on the water looked like a ghost. In the left edge of his frame, 10 feet out, there's a long shape under the surface like a finger. When you turn the picture in the light, it looks like it could be a mirror arm. When the deputies went back to that spot, the fog was gone and the water had drawn down and the long shape was not there. That is how a mind works under stress. Everything glints like it could be gold. Every secret has a custodian, even if the custodian does not want the job. In 1966, when Arlen wrote that letter, the sheriff was not Carlin. It was Hart Deaver, a man who had held the office for 16 years and had a smile like a coat rack. He had died in 1975. His widow lived on Grinnell and kept 2 dogs with matted hair and a house that smelled like cooked cabbage. She let the deputies search the garage where her husband used to smoke and putter in the evenings. In the rafters, in a cardboard box with old oil change receipts, they found a map of county closures with a cross in pencil on Crier Road that did not appear in the official ledger. They found a ledger with a page torn out, page 43, the one that would show the loads of fill that went to Crier in late 1966. They asked the widow if she ever heard him say the word Crier. She said, "He gnashed his teeth at night, sometimes, and once said the word sink in his sleep." That sounds like a joke, doesn't it? When I tell it, it sounds like a voiceover in one of those pulp movies. I don't want to be in a story like that. I don't. On December 18th, 1979, they brought a drill big enough to tap into mine roofs and put 6 holes across Crier Road and its ditch line. They found void in 3. On the 4th, the drill caught on something soft that tore like fabric, and then the bit spun free. The men running the rig looked at each other. The next day, at 8:10 a.m., in a sun that finally broke the week of low gray, they brought in 2 dump trucks, and under Shepler's direction, they put sand and pea gravel into those holes to try to make a plug. The sand poured into the ground for 40 minutes without filling. A whisper went through the small crowd watching. The whisper sounded like a prayer. At 10:34 a.m., a sheen of diesel breathed to the surface in the ditch and made a rainbow in the winter sun. The deputies stood downwind and could smell diesel. They could not say whether that sheen had been there already, a cousin of any number of farm spills of the last year, or whether it was the first lung of something bigger that had finally let go. The story of the day is that a hole opened and took a bus. The story of the week is that someone warned of that hole 13 years earlier, and that the warning did not hit the right ear because the letter lay under a table until a new sorter arrived. The story of the season is that someone put detour signs up that did not belong on that road, and that these signs pointed a heavy vehicle towards soft soil and a hollowness in the earth that had been sluiced and fed and mapped in pencil by men like Arlen and treated as a rumor by men like Deaver. The story of the year is what that does to a town's mind. On the last Friday of that year, when the square was lit with strings of colored bulbs and the big star hung off the firehouse, the family stood in a circle with candles at the steps of the courthouse. The candles burned with the kind of fire that bends and makes long shadows and puts hope into things you do not dare name. People who had never spoken hugged each other. The dean read the names and tried to keep her hand steady. She had placed on the steps a small stack of rock hammers, one for each student. A minister read a psalm. A man from the back shouted, "Where were you?" Not to any one person, but to the universe. And then he was quiet because the answer is always a blank space. Years later, in 1984, during a dry August when the farm pond south of the Crier Bridge fell to a ring of cracked mud, the county pulled a bus mirror arm from the mud with a hook. It was crusted. The Bluebird logo on the back scraped clean to a crescent by a trooper's pocket knife. The serial numbers stamped into the back matched two other buses still in service, and told them nothing. In 1987, a fisherman pulled a seat cushion out of a back channel near the South Fork Bend with a lure. The vinyl had torn in a triangle. The cushion had no number tag left. The lab said the foam inside was similar to foam used in Redford buses in the early 70s. The lab also said lots of seats use foam. In 1991, the quarry drained a sump after a strike and found a tire, but not a school bus tire. There was a rumor that after midnight one winter night, a road crew under floodlights poured concrete into a cut on Crier Road. The ledger for that week was clean. If you want the close piece, the one you can touch, it is this. The last page of the college motor pool log for November 9th shows the checkout of bus 27 at 7:12 a.m. and a line for return left blank. The last note on the sheriff's daily field log for that day, 23:59, says search suspended until daylight. A month later, the post office log shows December 6th, 79, 1542, old letter found. The letter was copied, returned to a sealed bag, and set on a shelf in a room with a humming light. When you stand in that room and hold your breath, you can hear the light in your own blood, and you can read the 3 small paragraphs on the onion skin and feel the past walk across the back of your neck like someone you used to know. What makes the story feel less like a story and more like a bruise is that the number of odd fits multiplies as you look. Harold received a warning in 1966, if he ever actually got it. The warning said the sheriff had buried something at Crier. The sheriff at the time had a page missing in his road fill log. The backhoe in December 1979 found fill in the top few feet of a place the 1966 map called Sink. The detour signs the morning of November 9th were not on any county list. The person who had charge of the detour signs for that quadrant in 1979 had an inventory that came up 2 sheets short that month. When asked, he said he lent 2 sheets to a man from another yard for a state job. He could not remember which man. The brown Nova that someone saw never appeared on any traffic stop logs. The letter from Dana Reed found in the locker is the last known clean sentence written by someone on that bus. It mentions the taped headlight and the tapping fingers and the detour. Those little things pin something down that would otherwise float up and be gone. There are people who will tell you they heard a bus horn in the fog that morning, one long blast like a ship on high water. There's a woman who heard metal scream, and then sudden quiet, and then birds. There's a man who says the back will rut under the guardrail, told him the driver cut right to avoid something, and that the angle of the scrape meant the bus took it on the curve. All of it sits in a file, and all of it waits. In the spring of 2003, I filed a records request to the Hollis County Sheriff's Office for the case file because I could not stand the way the story sat in my head, like a song you cannot shake. They sent me copies in a manila envelope that smelled like an attic. There were 67 pages. On page 24, there is a line that reads, Note, 1106, Postal Inspector Hopkins calls Re. Letter addressed to H. Brandt. Postmarked June 12, 66. Contents suggest knowledge of hazard Crier. Hand-delivered copy to sheriff. On page 31, the map with AG's little circle is copied in black on black. The pencil nearly vanished. I went to see Del Givens at his house. He keeps his father's Remington on a shelf. Not the one the men took in 1979, he says, but one he found at a pawn the year after because he wanted to hold the weight of it in his hands. He typed one line on onion skin for me, so I could hear the way it sounds. There's a rush of air in it. It is like someone trying to talk in a place where the walls absorb sound. If you stand on Crier Road now, the lines fresh from a repave, and listen to the wind go through the cottonwoods, you can hear the little hiss of air where the branches rub. A truck goes by and the road hums. Water still slides through the limestone under the fields. It has been doing that for 1,000,000 years. On a fog day, the grove gathers it and lets it fall in beads. In the winter of 1979, the county posted weight limit signs on either end of Crier, not out of superstition, but because a geologist told them a certain sentence in a slow voice. In the spring, the signs came down because trucks were needed and roads cannot be put behind glass. The families learned to hold 2 thoughts at once. that the world would ask them to go on, and that the last morning their kids stepped up onto a yellow bus is a fixed point, a pin in a map that does not move no matter how many new roads are drawn. There is one more thing, and it is not a twist so much as a breath held. In the university archives, in a box labeled Wicker E, there's a small tape recorder she used for field notes. Professor Wicker had recorded an intro to the trip that morning. You can hear the bus motor under her voice. The tape is grainy, and you have to lean in. She opens with the date and says the sky is low and bright with cloud. She makes a joke about how halfway through the stop at Eldon Caves, she will make them all eat sandwiches in the open because science does not stop for drizzle. There is a pause, and you hear a triangle of laughter somewhere near the back. And she says, "Okay, team." And then across her voice you hear a low tone, like a horn, and the tape stops because its battery dies, or because she clicked it off, and the tape clicks. There is a number on the side of the tape, written in blue pen, November 9th, 79. The archivist, "Let me listen with cotton gloves in a quiet room." The horn could be a truck. It could be something else. The tape stops. The room is quiet. The world holds its breath. I do not know if the bus is under Crier, caged in rock and silt in a space like a jaw, or if the water took it somewhere else, a mile away with a limestone roof let light through for 1 second in a place no one knew to look and then shut. I have stood with people who need you to tell them that you know. I do not. I know that in a post office on Polk Street in 1979, a woman cleaning out a gap in a table found a letter 13 years old that had not been delivered to a driver who had been told once to leave a thing alone. I know that a boy saw a taped headlight in fog, and that a man heard a metal scream, and that a set of detour signs moved people along like a current. I know that paint flecks look like truth until they are only paint. I know that sometimes the place where a road feels solid is thin. I know that water is patient. If you line the times up, you can walk the morning. 7:42 a.m., the bus leaves campus. 7:55, Dana writes a line to Kay about a taped light and a driver's tapping fingers. 8:13, Nancy lifts her hand and the bell chimes. 8:17, the bus passes the feed store, breath fog on glass. 8:21, Little Crow hears a voice on a CB say, "School bus eastbound, just turn off Crier." 8:25, a farmer hears a metal sound and thinks, "That's odd," and says nothing yet because everyone thinks a noise in the morning is a thing that takes care of itself. 10:06, Teresa writes the first note in block letters on a pad, underlined twice. Some details are wrong in stories like this, misremembered and polished by time. Some are true, and they are the nails that hold a board up. The letter from 1966 is a nail. The detour signs not in the ledger are a nail. The diesel sheen is a nail. The rest is a hushed clatter. I have listened to it. I still do. I know what the sheriff at the time wrote in his night log when he stood at the edge of the ditch at 1:10 a.m. on the 10th and looked into the black and saw only himself in the water. He wrote, "We are not equipped for this." And that is the sentence you hear in everything since then. It is not an excuse. It is a fact. There are people who go to Crier in late light and leave stones on the crown of the road, not as a shrine, but as a way to mark time, to count a hand's worth, and then another until your palm is empty and you can go back to your house and make dinner without checking the window when you pass. I ask staff of the bus yard key some days and stand at the fence and look at bus 28, 29, 30, the living lines. The buses still leave each morning. They make a shape on a map that looks like hope. I think of Harold's 2 fingers on the wheel, the 1, 2, 3, and the breath in the cassette, and the gravity that lives under all of us whether we drive heavy or light. The case file smells like dust and diesel and a little of old paper heat. When the light hits it just so, you can see the onion skin glow and the ghost letters where A.G. leaned hard on a failing ribbon to warn a man he thought he could save. If there's a sound in your head when you finish reading it, it is not dramatic. It is a small thing. It is a door closing quietly in a house when you know no one else is home. It is a breath held and then let out.